Why is it every time I go live right at noon, I feel like we should play the national anthem first or something? Hey, everybody, how's it going? I hope you're having a great day. And we're just going to talk about Israel today. There's a bunch of stuff happening, and it's not all great, actually. I've been pretty encouraged by what I've seen happening in Israel over the last few months. It seems like Israel has really been getting a handle on things all around. They took out all of Iran's air defenses, which really put a damper on Iran's designs on firing missiles at Israel from time to time. They also pretty much decimated Hamas down in Gaza, and or at least we thought they did. And then up in Lebanon, they uh, had great success at uh, wiping out the entire chain of command of Hezbollah and making them sort of stop their attacks with missiles and drones and things like that by crafting a quote unquote ceasefire that wasn't really a ceasefire. You've heard me talk about that a bunch. Hezbollah never agreed to the ceasefire. The only people that agreed to it was America, Israel, and the Lebanese government, or the Lebanese army, which is not uh, Hezbollah. I mean, Hezbollah is a political party in Lebanon, and that's the only tenuous connection there. But Hezbollah was so decimated by Israel that they took advantage of this supposed ceasefire to sort of start licking their wounds and trying to reconsolidate and trying to get more military materiel from Iran. That's been made doubly difficult because Israel has uh, taken over, but well, two things in Syria. Number one, HTS took over the western two-thirds of Syria and decided they were not going to allow Iran to continue shipping weapons across Syria into Lebanon. That put a real damper on Iran's designs of their having their proxy in Lebanon, but also the Israelis have taken over almost the entire swath of southern Syria, where it borders Israel, and even further north going up the Lebanese border. Some of the main smuggling routes that had been used to take military materiel into um, Lebanon are now closed for the duration. Now, I just saw today that the Iranian government had shipped some or tried shipping some uh, diplomatic pouches uh, to I guess their embassy in Syria. Those had been intercepted, and you're not supposed to open diplomatic pouches, but if you suspect that they're using it for military purposes, then I guess you can, because they did open those diplomatic pouches and they were full of $100 bills, US $100 bills, which the Iranians said, oh, those are just to support our operations in Syria. But you never heard of a wire transfer? I mean, uh, okay, so Mama Marissa says, what's a diplomatic pouch? Uh, this is something that is common around the world. Embassies anywhere on the planet are allowed to uh, ship things, or well, governments around the world are allowed to ship things to their embassies in other countries in what's called a diplomatic pouch. It's a sealed pouch, and by international agreement, the host country will not open those pouches. So they can ship whatever they want, supposedly, in there. However, if it's suspected that they are shipping things that would be considered contraband in those pouches, then apparently they can't open them. I didn't know that. I actually thought that if that bag has diplomatic immunity, they could be shipping heroin or meth in there and it would not be open. But apparently This one got opened and it was full of U.S. cash. A lot of money, actually, several $1 million probably in U.S. cash. So, uh, with all of that said, I thought Israel is doing pretty good. They've been making steady progress on everything except getting their hostages released, and they have been in talks recently to do that. And it sounded like they were actually making progress, that they might actually get some hostages out. However, in the last few days, things have been sort of going downhill a little bit, and this is not encouraging, what I have to tell you here. So first, before I do that, let me just ask that you hit the like button. Let YouTube know that we are worth sharing. Doesn't cost you anything, just takes a second. Just hit that little like button there. And if you tell me where you're coming in from over in the chat, it actually helps with the algorithm as well, to tell YouTube that there's a lot of conversation going on over here, and YouTube will share it with people who have not seen this before. Okay. So it'd be very helpful if you do that. Thank you very much, DeFort. I appreciate all of the donations over there. And if you have a question or a comment, go ahead and put them over there um, uh, in the chat box. Mama Rissa and Rubina are having a conversation about Rubina's luggage that got lost. They just made it back to Yerevan after being in the States for a couple of weeks for Christmas. We had a wonderful time with our grandbaby, and of course with Nathan and Rubina as well. And they made their long trek back to Armenia, and one of their bags did not show up. And the Lufthansa just says, we lost it. So it says it can't, they didn't make it on the plane. So pray that they get their bags back. It had a lot of their important Christmas gifts in them. So let's talk more about what's going on in Israel. First of all, we'll start down in the south, uh, between Gaza and Israel. Rocket fire out of Gaza has been escalating for 9 consecutive days now. This is very concerning because Israel has, you would think, trod over every square inch of Gaza at this point. That's probably not true, but I mean, you would think. It's just after more than a year of war, they've been at war. Gaza's not that big. It's about the size of Philadelphia. And you would think that they had been through every single building in Gaza. Well, actually, it turns out they have not. And so for the last 9 days straight, there have been rockets fired from Hamas out of Gaza, and at least 17 rockets launched over the past week. Now, there haven't been any injuries or deaths attributed to those. Most of them have landed in open areas or have been shot down by the Iron Dome system. Some of them happened just right inside Gaza. It was fired from Gaza to Gaza, fired at Israeli troops. But I'm just kind of surprised that they can still fire rockets at all. It's just amazing. Now, the IDF has been putting out videos of what they're finding. They're continuing to find buildings full of weapons. I mean, not just like one or two, but we're talking dozens, if not hundreds, of weapons, grenades, mines, explosives, vests, you name it, that they're finding. And actually, the videos that I saw today where they found all this stuff was in a school. And that's just par for the course. We know at this point, without a shadow of a doubt, that Hamas uses schools and hospitals and mosques as the places where they, at this point, they ought to just stop doing that, because it's such a known issue that it almost makes it easier for Israel to find their equipment and stuff, because they're just so apt to put them in places that are supposed to be off limits. Now, Israel evacuated and destroyed a hospital up in the north because it was just so commonly used by Hamas as a military hard point. And they got a lot of heat for that out of the mainstream media, of course. Like Israel is destroying one of the last places where Palestinians can go for medical care. Well, that's not true. There are like 17 open hospitals in uh, the whole of Gaza at this point. So, and they're all over. I mean, there's hospitals all over the place in Gaza. So it's not like there's no place that people can go to get medical help. The problem is probably all 17 of those hospitals are still being used by Hamas. They just won't stop. As a matter of fact, the IDF demanded the evacuation of the Indonesian hospital in northern Gaza. Now, just think about this. How many hospitals do you think there are in Philadelphia? As a matter of fact, let's ask ChatGPT how many hospitals. How many hospitals are there in Philadelphia? Let's just ask. Okay, well, I'm surprised. There are 29 hospitals in the city of Philadelphia. So it sounds like Gaza is about on par with Philadelphia. It's about the same size. A lot of the hospitals in what the West, I'm sorry, in Gaza were opened and maintained and staffed by other countries. In this case, Indonesian hospital in Gaza, and the IDF is demanding an evacuation of that hospital. This is northern Gaza. Why? Because they have probable cause to enter that hospital because it looks like it's being used as yet another Hamas strongpoint. And so now they're going to do that. Now there are some IDF generals who are pushing for a much stronger stance in Gaza. They're like, all right, enough is enough. We're going to do what we did in Jabalia, and we're going to go in and we're going to surround areas in Gaza. We're going to check every single person coming out of there for weapons. Anybody that's left in there is going to be considered an enemy, and we're going to go in and just level the place. Anything that is even remotely possible to be used as a military asset is going to get flattened. And we're just going to go neighborhood by neighborhood throughout the whole of Gaza, and we're going to flatten everything that might possibly be a threat to us. Now, what they're finding is that there are still tunnel systems in Gaza. They're still finding those. They're still finding rocket launchers that are buried in the ground and covered up. In many cases, they're finding these things when they fire the missiles at Israel. But suffice it to say that Israel has been kind of surprised at the fact that for 9 consecutive days, there have been rockets launched out of Gaza at Israel. And that's pretty serious. All right, please hit that like button, folks. Just one more time, as I mentioned, it definitely helps. I see a question here from LJ that doesn't have to do with Israel, but I'll go ahead and answer it very quickly. He says, with Ukraine destroying Russia's gas line, how much will this affect Putin's finances for the war? Well, I don't believe they're destroying the line. They're just shutting it off. They're just turning it off. This is called the Druzhba gas line. And does it surprise you, like it does me, that they still had a Russian gas line going across Ukraine that was pumping gas, that Ukraine allowed Russia to pump gas to Western Europe and make money off of that they were using to fund the war against Ukraine? For 3 years, Ukraine has been allowing that to happen because Ukraine was also making money off of it. But finally, they said enough is enough. It's going to hurt Russia more than it hurts us to shut it off, and they shut it off. Now, this Druzhba gas line was probably providing Russia with about 9% of its government income from what I've seen. And so it should, by taking that away, it's going to make it that much harder. It is starting to look like if Ukraine survives this and if they end up, if Russia actually ends up not taking over Ukraine, which would be Russia losing the war, it's not going to happen militarily. It's going to happen economically. And so Ukraine realizes that. Donald Trump realizes that. And that is going to be the place where they put pressure on Russia going forward. Okay. So I'll just end it with that. That I wanted to get that. There's Ministry of Sailing. How's it going, Schaefer? Good to see you. I appreciate that. 1999. Thank you very much. Kind of you, sir. If you aren't following Ministry of Sailing, you should. If you have any interest in sailing, John Schaefer's avid sailor and is a good friend of mine. So let's continue. So with Gaza, a Hamas rocket hit the kibbutz Be'eri earlier today. If you recall, kibbutz Be'eri is right near the border of Gaza, and it's one of the kibbutzim that was attacked on October 7th. I was there just 3 or 4 days after the attack and was one of the first journalists to enter kibbutz Be'eri after the October 7th attacks. There was still bodies and body parts being collected from all over that kibbutz. About 10% of the entire kibbutz was massacred in the October 7th attacks. And this is the first time in like 9 months that they've had a rocket heading that way or hitting Be'eri. Now, the IDF has been responding pretty heavily against Gaza. In the last 24 hours alone, they hit 40 targets with airstrikes, including a rocket manufacturing facility that's still there. This blows my mind. There's still a rocket manufacturing facility in Gaza. Holy smokes. So it kind of tells you that Israel is not really all that close to uh, finishing the fight in Gaza, not nearly as close as they would like to be. And the step up in attacks, airstrikes by the IDF is not just in response to the 9 consecutive days of rocket fire out of Gaza. It's also intended to put military pressure on Hamas because they are sitting down for prisoner swap talks, this time in Qatar. And this is one of the few times that Hamas and Israel will both be there for the talks. They won't be sitting at the table together because they might start slapping each other. So they're going to be the Hamas representatives in one hotel room, the Israeli representatives in another hotel room, and the Qataris and Egyptians and probably Americans will be shuttling back and forth. This is what they call shuttle diplomacy. But they believe that they could still get some hostages out. I'm going to predict that it will be a dozen, between 12 and 20 is all they'll be able to get out, if they get any. And that's simply because Hamas doesn't know where they all are. They can't even find them. They don't have any communications between each other. Okay, so let's move up to the West Bank. There's a lot going on in Judea and Samaria, and you haven't heard a ton about it in the news. But following the Israel guys, they of course live there, and so they put out a lot of good information about that. The Palestinian Authority, which is not friendly to Israel, has been cracking down on Hamas and the Palestinian Islamic Jihad in Judea and Samaria because they are concerned that when Israel gets done with Gaza, they're going to do to the West Bank what they did to Gaza, which is flatten almost everything. And so the Palestinian Authority, if they can't show that they can ride herd on these terrorists that are in their midst, they are going to get decimated like, you know, they're going to get decimated like Gaza did. Kurtz Prime says, "What's the latest on T-shirt email?" Yeah, we already made the drawing. One of our members, Debbie, won the drawing, and we've already mailed out the T-shirts. So we don't have any more T-shirts for our giveaways at the moment. Although I am in Savannah, there is a Black Rifle Coffee store here, so I could, if I get over there, I might buy another T-shirt, and we'll do another T-shirt giveaway. But the giveaways are going to be only for members over there, or members of the Hot Zone website, chuckholton.com. So if you go to chuckholton.com and become a supporter over there, you'll be in the running for all sorts of giveaways and extra stuff. We are all the people who entered the giveaway should have received a consolation prize from us as well. And so check your email for that if you entered the giveaway, if you were a supporter. All right. Now, so the Palestinian Authority has been conducting ongoing security operations, especially in Jenin. They call it the, Jenin Palestinian refugee camp. Remember, when they say refugee camp in relation to Gaza or the West Bank, those are not actual camps. They're not what you would think of people destitute, living in tents, that sort of thing. These are built up neighborhoods that they call refugee camps as a political ploy to make it seem like Israel has people living in tents for their entire lives, when in reality, they're just neighborhoods. Okay. There's been increasing militant activity by the Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigade, which was founded in Nablus, or the biblical city of Shechem. If you were on our Israel tour that we did in October, we took you to Nablus, at least to the area on Mount Gerizim overlooking Nablus, and you got to stand there and look down into this A zone, where there's a Palestinian zone where Israelis are banned to enter, and see the slum area where the Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigade was founded. Don't ask, we're not doing any more tours to Israel. We are doing a tour to Armenia in June. If you'd like to go, just send me an email, hotzoneholton@gmail.com, and we will send you the information about getting signed up to travel with Chuck and Connie Holton to the incredible country of Armenia. If you're like, Armenia, where's that? What's that? That just shows that Armenia is exactly the kind of place that you'd want to go, because nobody knows about it. It's a diamond in the rough. It's a hidden gem in Asia that is nicer than any place I've been in Europe. And most people just don't know about it. Look, I've been to most countries on planet Earth, and if I say that this is a place worth going to see, then believe me, it's a place worth going to see. Again, there's not too many places I haven't seen, and Armenia is top of the heap. So we take a trip there every year, and we're going in June, the 6th through the 17th, for 11 days, and it's going to be fantastic. You can come hang out with us and learn a whole lot about the history and geopolitics of the region. We'll take you right up to the front lines between Israel and Azerbaijan, where you can actually see Azeri military positions on the far hilltops, and learn a lot about the plight of the Armenian people. They are a beautiful house in a very bad neighborhood. So moving on to Syria. Oh, one more thing about the West Bank. The Palestinian Authority actually banned Al Jazeera from covering anything in the West Bank last week. And that came as a big surprise to many Palestinians. But Al Jazeera functions as an arm of the terrorists themselves. What they do is they go in under the auspices of, we're a legitimate media outlet. And then they go in and they set up and go like, oh, the Israeli IDF forces have 15 truckload, 15 armored vehicles and 2 tanks over here on the corner of this and this street, and they're doing this and this and this. Or, the Israelis are moving in right now into this, and they give out specific information about troops' strength and, their disposition, and give away the upcoming military operations. So they were banned from Gaza some months ago because they're putting Israeli troops at risk on purpose, giving up, telling bad people things they don't need to know. And now they're doing the same thing with the Palestinian Authority. And they're putting Palestinian Authority policemen at risk. So the Palestinian Authority banned Al Jazeera. This is crazy. I mean, it's not crazy. It's definitely needed, but it just goes to show that even the Palestinian Authority understands that Al Jazeera is 100% in the tank for the terrorists. And Al Jazeera, by the way, is owned by the government of Qatar, supported, paid for by the government of Qatar. I actually got recruited one time. They came to me, Al Jazeera in English came to me and said, "We want you to be our foreign correspondent." And I was like, not doing. That's not going to happen. Nope, not going to do that. So they went elsewhere. I'm not selling my soul to Al Jazeera, no matter how much money they have. And they didn't actually have that much money. Okay, moving on to Syria. The dynamics happening there. There were a first ever meeting in Damascus between HTS and the Syrian Democratic Forces. That's the Kurds. And that's super important. I mean, that's a big deal because there needs to be an agreement between the SDF and HTS. Otherwise, there's going to be a giant internal civil war. And we don't want that. The United States backs the SDF, the Kurds, and SDF is sort of being backed by Turkey. So I would not be surprised if there was some backroom dealing between the United States and Turkey, where the U.S. called Turkey and said, you had better push HTS to sit down with the Kurds. And they actually did that. But they weren't the only people that went to Damascus to meet with HTS. The German Minister of Defense, I guess, went there today, and it sounds like a lot of countries are trying to take HTS at its word that it wants to turn over a new leaf and not be a terrorist organization anymore. I mean, that'd be great, but unless they have converted to Christianity, I would trust them about as far as I could throw them. There has been some fighting near the Tishreen Dam still between Turkish-backed forces, not HTS, but the SNA and the Free Syrian Army, FSA. Those guys are backed by Turkey, and they've been fighting with the Kurds near the Tishreen Dam. So even as the SDF talks with the government, the new government of Syria, keep in mind that that government has not been voted for by anybody. They just took power. And they're saying that they're going to schedule elections 4 years from now. So they have to wait 4 years before the people can actually vote on anything. But while those talks have been going on, other Turkish-backed forces have been fighting the Kurds just near Manbij, over there on the Euphrates River. The United States has started building a base in the previously occupied by Russia base in Kobani. The Russians pulled out of that base in Syria, and the United States moved right in, and we're now fortifying that base. It looks like we plan to stay a while. You recall that we found out recently that the United States had a lot more forces in Syria than we thought we did, more like 2,000 instead of 900. And that's interesting. HTS, for its part, has been conducting raids around the country, detaining former members of the Syrian army. As you know, there have been a lot of extrajudicial killings taking place by HTS. And so I'm not sure what that has, what that portends for the future. Interesting times for sure, without a doubt. Okay, moving on to uh, Hezbollah and northern Israel. This is quite comical to me. Hezbollah is threatening to end the ceasefire, saying that Israel is not holding up its end of the bargain. Except you recall that Hezbollah didn't ever agree to the ceasefire. So Hezbollah is like, hey, no fair. Israel is blowing our guys up when they try to move back into border communities along the Israeli border and, with guns. Israel has been continuing to strike at Hezbollah targets and people inside Lebanon almost every day since the quote unquote ceasefire took place. There's like 29 strikes in the last 35 days or something. So those airstrikes continued because they, from the air, were able to ascertain that Hezbollah was making weapons transfers, trying to move weapons around from one place to another. And that's not just south of the Litani River, by the way. Israel has been striking in the Bekaa Valley and even north of there. They also were able to destroy multiple rocket launchers over the last several days in Lebanon. So Hezbollah keeps getting its head handed to it, and they're complaining about that, and they're saying that we're going to resume fighting up in the north if Israel doesn't stop blowing our rocket launchers up. Israel's like, wait, if we don't stop blowing up your rocket launchers, you're going to start using some of the rocket launchers. I get it. So we need to keep blowing them up so you can't use them. Israel's just like, yeah, whatever. Yeah, you guys, you do you, we'll do us. And they just keep blowing up targets inside Lebanon. Israeli forces have not pulled back from Lebanon. On the other hand, they have actually continued to advance, taking ground that they did not hold before the supposed ceasefire. And why they're doing that is because they continue to be threatened by those locations. And so they move troops into those locations. That actually is not breaking the ceasefire. Everything Israel is doing, striking at Hezbollah targets, blowing up rocket launchers, and moving forces into areas where they're being threatened, are all things that were stipulated that they could continue to do under the ceasefire. So for Hezbollah to say, no fair, you're breaking the ceasefire because you keep blowing our people up. No, go read the ceasefire that you didn't agree to. It says we can continue to do this. All right. The only reason Hezbollah is putting out that, those announcements that, hey, this is no fair, Israel is not, ceasing fire, is because they're trying to do what Hamas has done in Gaza, and that is use the media to damage Israel's reputation in the wider world. On that note, Israel has allocated a whole bunch more money in the last week in their upcoming annual budget for 2025. They've allocated millions more for trying to improve their image with the rest of the world. and to try to put a bigger focus on winning the information war, because that's where they've really been losing so far over the last year. And I'm like, um, suggestion. There's this guy Chuck Holton and Christian Broadcasting Network that spent 6 months uh, in Israel reporting on the war, trying to report on the good things that Israel is doing, and you won't let me embed with your forces. So here's a cheap way Israel could improve its image worldwide, and that's be more transparent, even with friendly media outlets. The thing is, they're still there. The IDF is just very, very, very arrogant. I don't mean the troops themselves. I think the troops, at least the ones I've met, have been super friendly, very open, even helpful. There was one point where I was in the north, up in Kiryat Shimona, and I was setting up for a live hit. So I set up a tripod and a camera, and I had Oscar Blue Ramirez with me. And of course, he looks a little bit like a Palestinian. He's kind of swarthy. And this security guard from one of the kibbutzim drove by and saw us setting up and stopped his car and pulled a gun on us and forced us back into our car, forced us to drive down the hill to the nearest military checkpoint, and then turned us over to the soldiers there. Very, very angry. The security guard was. He didn't speak any English at all, and he was just livid, just red faced, and pointing his gun at us, and just and screaming and hollering and everything. And the soldiers came out, and one of the soldiers spoke perfect English, thank God. And so he translated, and I'm like, look, we're media. We've got media passes. Here's my media pass. We're not doing anything we shouldn't do. And this guy was able to diffuse the situation with the angry security guard, so he didn't shoot us. And he just finally took off in a huff. And then the soldiers stood around, talked to us, and were like, "Hey, thank you for the work you're doing." And so the soldiers are cool, but the leadership, especially the leadership of the um, public affairs units, is just spectacularly just arrogant and very opaque. They're not transparent at all. They make it very clear, we don't care. We don't want you to report on us. I'm like, look, I've literally got more combat experience because I've spent the last 20 years covering combat zones. So I've got more, maybe not trigger time. I've got some trigger time too, but I've got more time in combat than any IDF soldier. And I'm not saying that to be proud. It's just a fact. IDF has not had people like in combat for, I mean, that more than a few years worth of experience. Now, it's been pretty intense experience they've gotten. And I'm not saying anything bad about them. I'm just saying I've got plenty of combat experience. I'm not going to be a liability to you in combat. Let me follow your troops around. And it's not like they don't allow media in there. Most of the media they allow to go out with their troops are they only allow Israeli media. Now they have allowed Trey Yingst of Fox News because he lives there. He's been there for a long time. He's got good relationships built. I don't know why they haven't allowed me in. I'm not going to complain about it anymore. They just won't get the kind of coverage that they could get from a guy like me. Okay. So if they're spending a lot more money to try to improve their image overseas, there's a cheap way they could do it. That's all I'll say. So last but not least, let's talk about the Houthis. The Houthis are just not going away. I don't know what it would take if you carpet bombed Sana'a. I don't think that would really even stop it because it would there's not much to hurt there's just not much to bomb. That's the big problem. And they've got these rocket launchers spread all over the country in very remote areas, underground, things like that. But they continue to fire drones and missiles at Israel. They rarely do any damage, but they've been firing drones and missiles almost every day for the last month. And Israel has struck very hard at the Houthis, so has the United States. And the Houthis just keep shooting. They fired another suicide drone at Israel, and they have attacked U.S. naval ships offshore as well. The Israelis and the Americans have responded in kind, and the Houthis claim they are now at, quote, open war, unquote, with Israel. I don't know what that means. I mean, so they're going to keep doing what they've been doing. They're not going to send troops. It might actually take troops on the ground in Yemen to put a stop to this. Before I was to put troops on the ground, I would just send a fleet of B-52s over there and do a good old-fashioned carpet bombing on Houthi infrastructure and just destroy bridges, roads. I mean, you don't have to bomb population centers. You don't have to bomb buildings. Just take out every building, every major road, just anything that allows them to move around, hit their freedom of movement, hit their electrical grid, hit their communications. That's what they've been doing. But just do it on a much, just ramp it up. And do it at night. Even if you were bombing, open fields outside population areas, but you were doing it at night, you could just even use dumb bombs, just drop 2,000-pound bombs all around Sana'a so that nobody could get any sleep. And just make life absolutely miserable, more miserable than it already is for the Houthi population. I mentioned, I did a whole live on this. You can go back and watch it, that there are now U.S. troops on the ground in Yemen. If you missed that live, you're going to want to go watch that. There are U.S. Special Operations troops on the ground in Yemen, and they're training forces that are counter to the Houthis. So they're not in the Houthi-controlled areas. They are in areas that are controlled by other forces, which heretofore have not been friendly to America, but they see an opportunity here to take some ground from the Houthis if they get help from the United States. So they're saying, hey, the enemy of my enemy is my friend, and so we will partner with the United States. And the United States is saying, okay. So U.S. and France apparently have special forces troops inside Yemen, and they are helping to train those militia groups to, help take back some land, to do our fighting for us and put a stop to the Houthi aggression. I don't know how, I mean, the problem is these militia groups are not very well armed. So the United States would have to pump a bunch of arms in there, and those arms could very well start shooting back at us at any point. So there's a real risk to that. Iran, for its part, affirms its commitments to the Houthis and to its other allies, and saying that they are going to continue supporting the quote unquote axis of resistance. And so that has great regional implications here. So, all right, folks, we got over 2,000 people online, just over 1,000 likes. Please take a second and go hit that like button. Really does help. If you like these, Thornblades says the French, ha 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 ha. Yeah, it is kind of interesting that the French are sending special forces to help train the anti-Houthi forces in Yemen. Because as one of my favorite quotes from Norman Schwarzkopf before the first Gulf War, they couldn't get the French to join the Allied coalition against Iraq, and one journalist asked Norman Schwarzkopf about that, and Norman Schwarzkopf said, "Well, going to war without the French is kind of like going deer hunting without your accordion." And that's one of my favorite quotes of all time. Absolutely love that quote. The French are good at one thing, and that's surrendering. As a matter of fact, they've been encouraging the Israelis to surrender to Hezbollah in Lebanon. Yeah, the French are usually not really somebody you want to count on. Nobody likes the French for sure. You know, the joke is, why does the new French Navy have glass bottoms on all their ships? So that they can see the old French Navy. That's pretty good. Are there any questions here? Yeah, Rubina says, please let me know if you see this and if he will answer it. What does Chuck think of the Pakistani rape grooming gangs being protected by the UK government? I think it's absolutely despicable. It is happening. There are, see, here's the problem. I've reported on this many times in the past. I'll just take a few minutes and explain this. You have all of these migrants. Thank you, RB. Very kind of you. You have all these migrants from places like Pakistan, Afghanistan, North Africa, who have moved into Western Europe, Italy, Germany, France, Spain, uh, Portugal, and the UK. I've done a lot of reporting on this. And they move in there. The problem with these guys, they may be fleeing terrible conditions in their home countries, whether that's war, disaster, poverty, whatever. They may actually be fleeing those things, but their problem is that if you're coming from an uncivilized country and you've grown up nowhere else, you're not suddenly going to become civilized by moving to a civilized country, because you have to learn how to be civilized. You have to be taught. And so what we've seen in Western Europe is that these people come from uncivilized countries, Syria, Pakistan, Afghanistan, whatever. And they don't just become model citizens when they get to Western Europe. They bring their they bring the issues that they were fleeing with them. We see this in the United States as well. And so what we see in the UK is these guys, they show up from a Muslim country. They've never seen a woman that wasn't wearing a burqa who was not a member of their own family. You know, until they get married, they don't see women at all. Okay. And they get to England. And of course, England's a progressive, modern, Western country. There are women running around in shorts and tank tops. And these guys, to them, that would be the same as, you know, taking a 17-year-old American teenager and, you know, letting him go live in a strip club. You know, a red-blooded American male, you know, is living in a porno movie or something. That to them is as titillating and you know, it's just to go to a public beach or a public swimming pool and see girls in bikinis. They're just not used to that, and it just fires them up, if you know what I mean. So, and they don't know how to go about navigating the sexual politics of the West because they've not been in the West. They didn't grow up in the West. So because of that, They go to a public pool and, oh my gosh, I can swim with these half naked girls. And they get in the pool. Well, they just start grabbing girls. God forbid they go out to a nightclub and they see these girls, the way they dress. Holy smokes. Um, at nightclubs, and they find a girl that's drunk. And next thing you know, this girl's getting taken advantage of. That's the tip of the iceberg. What's worse is that these guys have started to form these gangs that start to groom girls, young underage girls, in a way so that they can be taken advantage of, like, wholesale, selling them, right? And there's been a ton of high quality journalism done about this. But the British government, not just the British government, the German government, the Austrian government, many of the Western governments have been so reticent to claim, to say it, to call it what it is, migrant run rape gangs, that they really aren't doing anything about it. Just like the United States government, the FBI, and many law enforcement agencies have tried very hard to hide when there is violence or some other shenanigans committed by migrants in our country. Case in point, the terror attack that took place in New Orleans on the 1st of January. The guy was literally flying an ISIS flag from his bumper. And one of the first things the law enforcement did after they neutralized the threat was to cover up that flag. Why would they do that? Why would they cover up their flag? Well, so that they could try to control that getting out. They knew it would be an inflammatory thing with American citizens, and rightly so. And so they tried to hide it. At very first, the FBI literally came out and said, we don't believe this was any kind of ideologically motivated terror. And the guy literally had made and put out videos claiming, this is ideologically motivated terror, everybody, that I'm about to commit. So why do these, it's just believe me, if this was any kind of right-wing ideologically motivated event, they would have posted it all over the place. But it is a major problem in Europe as a whole. I was wondering if you would be interested. How interested are you in having me go and do more reporting on the immigration stuff in Europe this year? Because places like Sweden are off the charts. I mean, they've had a ton of actual bombs going off in Sweden perpetrated by migrant gangs. There's a tremendous amount of sexual violence happening against women in Sweden by migrant gangs. And I have gone and reported on it years ago, probably 5-6 years ago. But if you would be interested in having me report on these kind of things, put that in the comments there and say so, and I'll do that. While I have you, let's just take a moment. And if you have not subscribed to the podcast, do me a favor. And it doesn't cost you anything. It's free. You can go you have to close the chat box actually for just a second so you can see it, but just hit subscribe there. There's a thing here on my screen. I can see how many people have subscribed because of this or during this video. And it would be a huge favor to me if you just help us grow the channel by hitting subscribe. We're not going to spam you. We're not going to send you emails. If you want to get notified when I'm about to go live, you can hit that and it will notify you when we're about to go live. So that's good for you, good for me. Okay. All right, that's all I've got for today. Thank you for watching the Hot Zone. I'm going to go spend some time with my beautiful grandbabies here in Savannah, Georgia. One thing I wanted to just say on a personal note, since you know you guys are kind of like family to me. Um, I at the beginning of each year, I try to get some, I try to measure all my health metrics to kind of see where I'm at. And this year, for the first time, I went and got a DEXA scan. If you don't know what that is, it's a full body X-ray that will tell you a lot about where you are physically. It'll tell you your body fat percentage. It'll tell you where your body fat is accumulating. It'll tell you whether it's visceral fat or not. It'll tell you your lean muscle mass, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I've always wanted to get those done. I finally got around to going and doing it. It really was simple. It was cheap. It was about $100, and without insurance. And I went in and got it done. Took about 10 minutes. It was really interesting to get all of those metrics back and to see where I am. And I was kind of unpleasantly surprised. My body fat percentage is higher than I thought it was. And it shows me definitely where I need to work this year, fitness wise. So I'd recommend that you do that if you care about your fitness. Yeah, what really I'm just watching the comments here, people talking about the UK. I'm just if you live in the UK, why? That's the question I have for you. If you live in the UK, why? Why would you subject yourself to living in a place where you literally could be put in jail for what you post on Facebook? You're you don't have free speech. Where your freedom is curtailed to that extent, I'm sorry, but I would have to leave. I'd have to move. That's terrible. Tizra Pinto says it's not body fat, it's strategic reserves. My scale says, ow, ow, get off me. Yeah, right. Um, well, I am committed to outliving my wife by one day at least, just so that she won't have to live without me. So I want to be as healthy as I possibly can. And so I'm going to do that. I'm gonna make some changes this year. As a matter of fact, I've been fasting so far since the first of the year. I always fast for the first week of the year, at least in recent years. And oh my gosh, I'm right at that point. Like I'm 3 days in where like I'm ready to eat my arm. Everything I see looks edible, even including my grandchildren. Like I just want to, and I see a picture of Kentucky Fried Chicken or something, and it just makes me want to die. But I'll get through it. Uh, I figure make your first week of the year the hardest week of the year, and then everything after that will be gravy. Oh, I said gravy. Oh man, I want some. I want some mashed potatoes and gravy now. Oh, so hungry. All right. Well, God bless you guys. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you have a great day.